Greetings ladies and gents, welcome back to the Craft Hammer. I'm your host Stefan, and in today's video we're going to be doing a small enough review of the Imperial Agents Codex that came out. I know it's a bit late compared to when it actually came out, but I have been a bit busy as I've been trying to get back into the hobby and mostly focusing on getting prepared for tournaments. If you're curious, I did restart this channel in a sense with a Custodes Army showcase, followed up by the results of the first tournament that I played. And since we're also going to be focusing on a tournament coming up in October, it's been a bit hectic trying to get this out, so apologies for it being a bit late. I wanted to give my thoughts on the codex itself. I do have a little sheet over there with a few points just to make sure that I'm not missing anything specifically. And hopefully, if you're both a new person to the hobby or someone who's been here for a while and you're looking at the codex and wondering what's inside, I will try and give you a decent enough guide. I know there's probably better competitive players out there that might be able to give a better rundown on the data sheets, of course. So don't expect, super detailed tournament assessment of this codex. That would not work well in my favor, so let me give you my thoughts overall. And in the future I do actually want to release another video discussing what I see as some common issues across all codexes that are affecting both new and existing players, and better ways to, redesign the codex system from the ground up and make sure that people aren't buying something that doesn't either fit their criteria of what they want from a lore book or fit their criteria of what they want from specifically a rule book for playing the most up and coming tournament, etc. So yeah, we're gonna do that in another video, but I'm sure I'll probably come across some of those points that I have in mind in this review, and hopefully this will help you decide whether you'd like to get this codex or maybe you'll give it a pass. So let's get into it and I'll give you my thoughts. Now, the first thing that I want to kind of just call out, just in case I start rambling, I do want to try and split this up between the first half where we have the lore and then the second half where we have the actual data sheets for the troops that are coming into this codex. So if we're looking at it from both a beginner's trip into the hobby, but also if you are here much longer than that and never got round to actually collecting, I believe there was an Imperial Agents book in 7th edition, and then before that it was the Demon Hunters codex that came out. If you didn't get those two books, as a new player, this is a pretty decent starting place to kind of get to grips with the Inquisition and some of their kind of famous Inquisitors. And if you are a more veteran player, and as I said, you never managed to pick up those two previous books, this would be, a decent enough addition to your collection, but I would make sure that you come in with, I suppose, lower expectations than you would hope. I know you can see it from the reaction to this codex throughout the community. A lot of it is, of course, focused on the datasheets and what happened with the Death Watch. So if that's what your main focus is, definitely come in with a much lower expectation from a higher quality codex. And this does not meet that criteria that well, but lore wise, if you want a central location, it's a decent enough starting position. Now I do have one or two gripes, and that is the actual lore that we get for the assassins and also the navy side of the Imperial Agents. So that would be the navy breachers, the rogue traders. I believe we have the navigator To be honest, the lore there is kind of lacking. We get very small excerpts, and it's mostly surrounded by artwork, which is fine. There's some great artwork contained within this book, and especially each of the assassins get a nice big page of a portrait for each one of them. All they really get is a tiny little description at the bottom. There's definitely, a bit missing there. I feel like if they could have just added a few more pages, they could have given us more lore for those specific sections, so the assassins and the navy side. But overall, we do get some wonderful artwork contained within. We also get some nice photos of the minis displayed and some decent lore, so that if you need somewhere to start, somewhat decent. So if you're new to the hobby and you can find this on a discount and you want some lore, I would recommend it. It's not the worst thing ever. Now, as I said, we're going to get into the datasheets, and we're going to get into the models that are represented here. And this is kind of where it goes downhill to a certain degree, depending on what you want from this army book. This is one of the kind of issues I think most people, whenever we see a codex coming out, if it's not reliant on a separate one, so like let's say the Blood Angels and the Space Marine one. So the Blood Angels one, to a certain degree does rely on the datasheets that are contained in the generic Space Marine one. If that is not the case, we generally expect that a codex is able to stand by itself and give us a proper full army that has versatility, and we're able to adapt to whatever the current play is. I think where I actually want to start before jumping there, I really want to look at Kill Team. From watching a video, I'd say nearly 2 years now, or maybe a year and a half, from Valrak, he had I believe some sort of like inside scoop that someone was telling him, where GW sees Kill Team as an experiment ground for 40k. So in other words, that's why we're getting so many new kits from Kill Team. We have, of course, the Scions, the Kroot, the Vespids, and of course the various Imperial Agents forces that came out through Kill Team. And if they do well and they sell well, they get a bit more love in the 40k game. This, I think, is where the issue really lies with this codex. This is a majority of things that were released through Kill Team, and most people have been able to see the models. We've been able to see, the datasheets that were created so that they can be used in 40k, and there's nothing really new. I know Kotias is technically a new mini, but it is still a character that we already know, and of course that also has its own controversy around it because of just the design is not appealing at all. So it's one of those things where the Imperial Agents Codex could have been good if we had not received the Navy Breachers, the Arbites, the Rogue Trader team. If none of those were released beforehand, this probably would have been a bit better received. There's still issues when it comes to actually playing it as an army. If you are new to the hobby, this is not a new beginner-friendly book. There's a reason why Space Marines are the most popular. They have so many different options, and they're rather forgiving when it comes to actually playing them rules-wise. They have a decent armor save, decent toughness, shooting, melee profiles, etc. You really need to figure out a lot of different combos to make sure that you are able to play it as a standalone army. You can't even make really a standalone army where it's just Imperial Agents. Now, I know they include Deathwatch, Grey Knights and Sisters. In reality, if you have those model kits, you're most likely already playing those armies, so it's not that you're creating an Imperial Agents army, you're just trying out something because you have so many of the other ones. Most likely, the Imperial Agents will never be your main army, unless you're willing to probably put in quite a bit of money, because at the end of the day, if you're going to be focusing on the humans in here, well, I know the Sisters of Battle would also be considered humans, but the non-Space Marine side, you would probably need to get quite a number of them, and then maybe put in sisters, some of their tanks, maybe Grey Knights and Death Watch, if you really wanted to make a force. But again, it's one of those things where roleplay wise, it's a cool concept to get this codex. We have a nice interesting section for a crusade, so if you want to create your own crusade where you get an inquisitor and you're building up a force, you know, it's great for that. It makes you feel like an inquisitor and you have all these interesting options. You will get to a wall where you start to realize that you will need to bring in one of those 3 other options if you actually want to, let's say, destroy a tank or a dreadnought, and it may not be as great when you hit that wall. To a certain degree, it's a bit weird that as an inquisitor you only get 1 squad of Sisters of Battle, or only 1 squad of Grey Knights, and then a mixture of Death Watch stuff. I can see that they're trying to make it thematic, that you can, you know, call upon these forces, but at the same time, if those weren't there, it's definitely missing a lot. It needs its own flavor. I would say that the Scions most likely should also be part of the Imperial Agents book. Now, that doesn't mean they need to be removed from the Imperial Guard book. It's not something I would argue. I can understand that maybe you would want to thematically put them only in the Imperial Agents book, so that the Imperial Guard book kind of relies more on the Khazarkin. But again, that would be the same thing that you'd be doing with the Death Watch, and that's where they've kind of removed an important faction, and people who were collecting just pure Death Watch Space Marines, now all of a sudden pretty much their army has been, well, messed with. In regards to the whole Death Watch incident that's just occurred, I'm not entirely sure why they decided to completely remove the codex. I do believe that this kind of, this is where that video talking about the problems with the codex and how certain things within Space Marines could have actually been consolidated in a different way, so that, you know, if the argument from GW is that, well, we have too many Marine kits and Death Watch is another addition to that, and we just don't have enough capacity, or we're not able to track the sales well enough because it's mostly generic Space Marine stuff with a Death Watch upgrade kit. There were probably better ways to consolidate the Space Marine line so that Death Watch could keep their own codex, and you could probably, you know, maybe give them a better kit when it comes to the actual kill team itself, and if they really wanted to, they could make a Primaris version of it if that's what would have kept them back in an actual army themselves, because they've been folded in here. Now again, it's possible that if you combine them with some of the Imperial Agents, maybe it will be a nice force that people can play with. I do not have the experience to kind of comment on that specifically, but it's a shitty thing that, you know, people now can no longer use that army. Similar to the Harlequins, they lost, and now it's just folded into the Eldar Codex. So it's one of those things where there are great additions to the lore. You know, Harlequins, Death Watch, there's all these other factions that are contained within it. If GW doesn't support them, provide a way for new players and existing players to comfortably decide to collect that force, and, as I said, make sure that they have the model kits that would, you know, give them the statistics in the background and be like, okay, we can see that this many things that are designated for Death Watch are constantly being sold, so we know that people are enjoying it. So it's a mixture of poor management from GW side, which then the numbers don't add up, because, as I said, you and I might go and get a intercessor box, and then that's going to be marked up for just generic Space Marines, and we'll get a upgrade sprue and create a Death Watch, you know, intercessor squad. There's a bit of a issue there when it comes to most likely how they were gathering their information, and they saw that this army was not being sold properly, so let's just axe it and fold it in here, I guess as a consolidation that, hey, you still technically have the Death Watch if you want them, but it's not nice for people, that's for sure. Now, I don't know if we'll actually get a continued Imperial Agents force within 11th edition. I have a feeling that we might, because things like assassins, inquisitors, the Ministorian priests, obviously the Arbites, Navy breachers, and now technically the Death Watch themselves, they all had their things scattered around their datasheets, and there was no central location apart from the actual codex for the Death Watch. And I'm assuming that they want to keep them all into one book, even though it might not be really a competitive book. It's something that is a fan service, and making sure that until they decide to get rid of some of these models, they have somewhere where they can legally say that these are our models, you can't copy them, these are the rules for them, etc. So I'm assuming there's a high possibility. Now, if my thoughts in the Codex video will be somewhat coherent, I suspect that we might be moving to a lot more digital rules in the future, and codexes either will be completely gone, or from my ideas, they would be something that is more dedicated to lore, photography for the actual models, and maybe some crusade rules, and maybe even they might, add in something like a how-to paint guide. We shall see if the Imperial Agents are still around in the next edition. We'll see in the next few months if people can find a way to make just Imperial Agents Force competitive and win any tournaments, or do they have to bring in Sisters of Battle, Grey Knights and Death Watch? I hope that this video wasn't too rambly, although I suspect it might have been. As a new beginner, I would not recommend this as your first army, that's for sure. It would probably also not be your main army if you are a veteran of the game. This is something if you want some extra flavor for your Imperial forces, and if you like some of the models and just want to add them to your collection, that's when you kind of get this. Now, I did start my own Inquisition force. I didn't really call it an Imperial Agents force, but I started my own Inquisition force about 2 years ago, and I slowly collected a few older metal models, and then eventually I got the Navy breachers, I got an assassin or two, and then the rogue trader entourage, and eventually I would like to get some Arbites. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to do an Imperial Agents army showcase next, and I'll show you what I got and the nice flavorings that they managed to bring to the table. We'll see that maybe in the future I might try to go to a tournament with this. There's definitely no expectations of that anytime soon. If I was, I kind of would like to get some Grey Knights, to be honest, but I don't want to get Grey Knights until they get a refresh, as pretty much that's what I expect will be happening for Grey Knights in the next year. Either their Terminator kit and their normal squads will get a slight boost in height, whether or not they'll be counted as Primaris, or whether or not lore-wise they're just there to be reflected at a better scale and there's no actual change to them. We'll see what happens there. I hope that it's just GW comes out and says they're not Primaris, they're just the same gene seed that they've always used, but we wanted to reflect their size to be a bit better and represent them a bit better in comparison to, let's say, the Space Marine Terminators, for example. So for now, I'm not sure how I would, create an actual force of 2,000 points. I would be interested in trying at least 1,000 points, but again, it's one of those things where I have to experiment and see what data sheets I can bring. And to a certain degree, I'm not sure if I really want to clog up the table with, at least for a tournament, with hundreds of models. That would be something that's more for a friendly game. You do want to be able to actually move all your models up the board and not have a million dice to roll, and also be able to complete your turns within the allotted time for a tournament game. So we'll see where this goes. For now, my army showcase will just be things that I really wanted to collect because they look cool, and I have a little thing in my mind for the Inquisition and that's kind of where it is right now. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a like down below. Drop down a comment what you think about the Imperial Agents Codex. Have you seen it yourself, or maybe you have it? Would you know a good list that you can make? I know I would probably add a few Terminators for the Grey Knights, and then 1 or 2 Inquisitors, and see how it goes from there. Stay tuned, don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for the Inquisitorial Agents, though for me it's the Inquisition Force that I have Army Showcase. Soon enough I'll be also going to my second tournament in October. I will be trying to do a hobby update for that, and at the moment I'm trying to get my Chaos Knights ready for that game. And yeah, until next time folks, take care.